The night screamed in silence as snow blanketed the ruins of Elder Vale. Ashen winds howled through the hollow palace where once warmth thrived. On the frost-cracked throne sat Queen Elira, draped in white gold robes, her gaze glazed like ice. In her hands she clutched a charred locket, its metal twisted by fire, its memory burning beneath her skin. "It was never supposed to end this way," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. The sapphire embedded in her crown dimmed, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat fading. The portrait of a child, her child, lay shattered at her feet. Her fingers trembled, yet no tears came. She had banished warmth, banished feeling. What was once grief had calcified into frost. With a flick of her wrist, icicles snaked across the walls. "Let there be stillness," she said. But as the wind screamed louder, a shadow in the storm whispered back, "Stillness is not peace." And so the Ice Queen's frozen heart cracked, just enough for the journey to begin. Beneath the palace, frozen caverns slumbered in eerie silence. Elira descended, torchless, led only by instinct. Her footsteps echoed against crystalline walls, as if spirits whispered through them. The frost beneath her heel was ancient, untouched by time, pulsing with old magic. She paused at an altar, once sacred, now cracked, upon which lay her daughter's favorite doll, untouched by decay. "Why did you return here?" she asked herself, her voice a hush in the cavern. The doll's glassy eyes seemed to stare back. Memories surged, laughing footsteps down marble halls, tiny hands clutching hers, lullabies beneath starlit windows. They pierced her like icicles. She staggered back. Her hand brushed against the wall, and warmth flared briefly. Startled, she withdrew. The ice had responded to her pain. Something deep within still lived. The storm above was merely noise. The storm within was waking. In the heart of the cavern, Elira knelt before a frozen pool. Beneath the surface shimmered faint images, ghosts of warmth. Her daughter's laughter, her own smile once radiant, now unreachable. Her reflection shimmered beside theirs, distant and cracked. She placed her fingers on the surface. It pulsed. From the depths, fire bloomed. Not real fire, but memory made light. Golden hues swirled, casting flickers across the icy vaults. Elira recoiled, shielding her eyes. "No," she muttered. "I sealed you away." But the memory did not fade. Her daughter dancing in sunlight. Her husband singing lullabies. Joy, joy. The pool rippled. Then the fire flickered and collapsed into darkness. In the silence that followed, a single tear, first in years, escaped Elira's eye and fell onto the ice. Where it landed, the frost hissed. Elira ascended from the depths, her heart heavier but flickering. In the mirror chamber of her tower, she stood before her reflection, older than she remembered. Lines etched across her once youthful face. Her crown, once symbol of grace, now resembled a prison. She touched it. Silence. She tried to speak, to summon her voice, but it caught in her throat. All her spells, her power, had silenced the very part of her that once sang, the part that once loved. She removed the crown. A gust of wind swept through the chamber. Her silver hair lifted. A strange peace followed, foreign and fragile. Then she heard it. The faintest sound. A laugh. A child's laugh carried on wind from nowhere. She turned sharply. The room was empty. But in the mirror, a small handprint fogged the glass beside her. Behind the throne, buried deep within stone, Elira unearthed a shard of ancient crystal. Not ice, but memory. The oracle shard. It glowed faintly with pulses of light, each beat a memory long denied. She held it to her heart, and visions overwhelmed her. Her own birth, her mother's eyes, her daughter's first steps, the day she froze the realm to preserve a love she could not let go. Pain bloomed. But behind it, truth. I froze the world to stop time, she realized, because I couldn't stop loss. The shard trembled. cracks webbed across it, as if the truth itself was fragile. With a breath, she placed it back in the wall, and left it there. This time, she did not run from the ache. Elira stepped into the royal winter garden, once a sanctuary of blossoms and birdsong. Now, it was a graveyard of ice. Marble benches cracked beneath frost. Ivy hung brittle like broken chandeliers. She moved slowly, fingers grazing frozen petals. They were orchids, she whispered. You named each one. Memories stirred like echoes beneath the snow. Her daughter dancing barefoot, crown of daisies in her hair. Laughter. Life. Elira's chest tightened. At the garden's center stood a frozen fountain. Inside it, a statue of Elira and her child, locked in a moment of joy. But frost veiled their faces, twisted by time into near strangers. She reached out, just as the ice beneath her feet creaked. A fissure split the ground, small but sharp. The earth beneath the frost was waking, and with it, things long buried. In a forgotten chamber behind the chapel, Elira uncovered an ancient mirror, rimmed in ironwood, untouched by frost. It shimmered unnaturally. She saw not herself but versions of her, grieving, wrathful, broken, regal. She whispered, "What am I now?" The mirror flickered. In one reflection her daughter stood beside her, older than she remembered, smiling. But it wasn't memory, it was possibility. "You are still becoming," said a voice, not her own, yet spoken from her mouth. The room chilled. The mirror cracked just slightly, spittering across the version of her who wore a crown of thorns. She staggered back. In her flight from sorrow, had she become something monstrous? She touched the glass, felt warmth. Grief, she realized, had not been her prison. Denial had. Elira wandered into the music hall, now entombed in stillness. Harps lay covered in frost like sleeping swans. The great piano stood sealed in ice. But one key, middle C, gleamed. She pressed it. A single note rang out, clear and mournful. The walls pulsed. More notes followed, ghost tones from nowhere. A lullaby. Her lullaby. She fell to her knees as the music wrapped around her, alive. She had not sung in years. Her voice had turned to frost with her heart. Tears slid down her cheeks. She began to hum. And the ice atop the piano cracked, revealing a music sheet underneath, her daughter's final composition, scribbled with tiny hearts. "I thought I lost you," Elira said. "But your song lives in me." A blizzard lashed the outer ramparts as Elira climbed the tower's edge, drawn by a presence. There on the parapet stood a figure cloaked in black, face hidden, aura familiar. "You again," Elira said, voice harder now. "The shadow." The figure turned. "I am what you buried." A flash of lightning revealed its face, her own twisted by rage and grief. "You froze the world to preserve love," the shadow said. "But love is motion. You made it still, you made it die." Elira's fists clenched. "I did what I had to." "Then why are you unhealed?" Wind howled between them. Elira stepped forward. The shadow stepped back, dissolving into the storm. "Left alone," Elira whispered. "Is this my punishment or my path?" Deep in the bell tower, untouched for decades, hung the bell of return, only rung to welcome the kingdom's future. It had not sung since her daughter's naming day. Elira stood beneath it, hand on the rope. The wind was silent now, waiting. "I swore never to ring it again," she said. "Not after." Her voice broke, and yet the silence was heavier than grief. She closed her eyes and pulled. The bell tolled. Its sound rolled across mountains, through frozen forests, and into distant villages buried in ice. A wolf howled in reply. A baby cried somewhere beyond the walls. The bell's final note echoed into stillness, and for the first time in an age, warmth followed it. Elira stood still, as if unsure whether to feel triumph or fear. At the heart of the palace stood the memory cloister, a sanctuary once reserved for monks, now abandoned. Lines of ice curled around forgotten scrolls and stone pillars. Elira entered barefoot, drawn by a flickering lantern left lit against reason. A voice greeted her, not spoken but remembered. "Do you seek truth or comfort?" She turned and saw no one. A scroll unrolled on its own. Upon it, a painted scene of her coronation, glorious, full of warmth. But as she watched, the colors faded, the crowd vanished, and only a weeping child remained, herself. "I rose to protect," Elira whispered, "but I buried her." She knelt before the scroll. The lantern flared. The walls around her pulsed, and echoes of vows, long broken, stirred. "Truth," she said aloud, "even if it shatters me." The cloister trembled. The throne room lay abandoned, its grandeur a hollow echo. Statues of former rulers stood wrapped in ice, eyes downcast, lips sealed. Elira walked slowly between them, her own crown cradled in her arms like a child. "My rule is built on fear," she said, her voice trembling. "Not love, never love." She placed the crown upon the empty throne, not her own, and stepped away. The air shifted. A pulse of warmth surged from the crown, then faded. The statues cracked. One by one they shed their frost, revealing expressions of grief, not judgment, as if they too had erred and understood. Elira whispered, "You were never watching me. You were waiting for me to see." She turned from the throne, not as queen but as woman. The silence did not accuse her. It welcomed her. In the mountain hermitage once inhabited by the fire monks, Elira discovered remnants of their final teachings, symbols etched into stone, glowing faintly through the frost. She brushed snow from a slab and revealed a circle of flame surrounding a falling leaf. A voice, deep, calm, echoed within her. "Release is not loss. It is returning." She stood still, the wind around her suddenly warm. A monk's robe, left hanging on a hook, began to sway gently, though no one touched it. A pile of ashes near the altar caught her eye. She reached down, and from within it pulled a scroll sealed in wax. "To the last queen." She opened it. "Love is not preserved in ice. It moves, it changes. Let it go, and it will return." She folded it slowly. Her fingers no longer trembled. As Elira returned to the palace summit, dark clouds roiled above, thicker than any storm she'd known. The sky cracked with violet lightning. The storm wasn't weather. It was her. Years of sealed emotion, buried anger, love twisted by grief. It now surged outward, threatening to consume the realm. She stood on the spire, wind thrashing her cloak. Her sapphire crown still lay far below. She stretched out her arms. "I see you," she called to the sky. "You are me." The lightning struck close, illuminating her in searing white. She didn't flinch. She wept. And the storm paused. A great stillness fell, pregnant with choice. Beneath her feet, the ice that held her realm began to crack, not with violence, but release. Inside the shattered chapel, a final vision waited. Elira approached the stained glass window, once depicting her family in divine light. It was broken now, but light still poured through. On the altar stood a mirror, not of memory, but of now. She saw herself, tear-streaked, silver-haired, crownless. And behind her, her daughter. Not as she was, but as she would have become, smiling, strong, unafraid. Elira turned, but the space was empty. A whisper reached her. "You carried me too long. I was never meant to be your anchor. I was meant to be your wind." Elira collapsed to her knees. "I release you," she said. And just like that, the chapel warmed. Frost peeled from the walls like breath from glass. The bells rang, not from hands but from truth. She did not rise a queen. She rose, herself. At the edge of the kingdom stood the gate of seasons, sealed shut since the day Elira froze the realm. Made of woven roots and crystal veins, It had once marked the boundary between time and stasis. Elira stood before it now, no longer a monarch, but something softer. The gate pulsed faintly, responding to her presence. As she stepped forward, the frost upon it began to melt, forming rivulets that shimmered like tears. She placed her palm upon its heart. "I do not seek to rule," she said, "only to release." The gate creaked, once, then twice. Light filtered through the cracks. She didn't push it open. She waited. The gate opened inward. Warm air met her skin like breath. Behind her the snow didn't melt, but it ceased to fall. Ahead a forest bloomed, not fully, not yet, but enough to hope. Just beyond the gate, nestled in a clearing of quiet thaw, stood the pilgrimage tree, a towering oak encased in crystal. Legend said it grew from the first tear ever shed in the realm. Elira approached slowly. Inside the clear shell, leaves shimmered like fireflies, frozen mid-dance, aching to move. She reached into her satchel and withdrew the locket. Twisted, charred, no longer burdened with grief, but memory. "I no longer need you," she said, "but I honor you." She hung it on a low branch. The tree pulsed once. A single leaf dropped. It did not shatter, it drifted. The ice cracked gently, gracefully, revealing bark beneath. Not all, but some. Enough. A robin landed where the leaf had fallen, tilted its head toward Elira, and sang. Elira came upon the riverbed, once frozen solid, now fractured with veins of flowing water. She knelt beside it, trailing her fingers through the stream. It was cold, but alive. Reflections danced on its surface, her past, her child, her kingdom. Yet, they no longer haunted. They shimmered, then dissolved. She cupped the water and drank. It stung at first, then soothed. A rush of memory flooded her, not painful, not joyous, but simply true. Her daughter's laughter, her failures, her forgiveness. "I carried it all," she murmured. "But it was never mine to keep." The river widened. She stood, and as she did, the stones beneath her feet began to thaw, revealing moss, color, life. She did not cry, but the river did. At the cliff's edge overlooking the realm, Elira stood wrapped in her ceremonial cloak, embroidered with symbols of ice, legacy, and rule. It had once been armor. Now it was weight. She removed it. The wind took it, lifting it like a bird, scattering it in the sky. Threads unraveled midair, transforming into flakes of silver that vanished into the horizon. She stood in simple robes, skin bare to the breeze. No crown, no burden, no magic shielding her from feeling. Below her, the ice over lakes shimmered, not with stillness but tension, ready to break, ready to move. "I no longer command you," she said to the wind, "but I walk with you." The world did not answer. It didn't need to. Night fell gently, not with storm, but with peace. Elira wandered into the amphitheater, once a place of royal proclamations, now echoing only silence. She stood at the center. For the first time in decades she sang. Her voice, aged, weathered, imperfect, rose into the still air like smoke from kindling. It wasn't sorrowful. It wasn't triumphant. It simply was. Her daughter's lullaby, unfinished, now complete in her breath. As she sang, birds gathered. Ice melted from arches above. The moon, full and patient, bathed the stage in silver. The final note lingered and faded. There was no applause. Only the sound of wind moving freely again, and the subtle bloom of a violet growing through stone. Elira smiled. The first crack was faint, barely a whisper beneath her feet. Then came another. Elira stood on the palace's central bridge, the one arching over the river of mirrors, its waters long imprisoned in a glacier's grasp. But now the ice was speaking. It fractured, not with violence, but with purpose. Shards curled upward like petals blooming. Beneath the surface, fish darted. Light danced. Elira knelt, placing her palm against the melting edge. "I no longer hold you," she said. "You're free." The river surged, not wildly, but gently, as if exhaling after centuries of breath held too long. Behind her, distant bells rang, not from her palace, but from the village beyond. The people were stirring. The realm had heard her silence. Now, it listened to her song. Elira walked the overgrown path to the outer villages, holding no staff, bearing no sigil. Instead, she carried a single lantern, flame flickering in pale light. Each step forward was met by silence, cautious, uncertain. Then a child appeared from behind a frostbitten tree, eyes wide. Elira stopped. She lowered the lantern. The child took one step closer, then another. Finally, he whispered, "Are you her?" Elira smiled. "I was." The child reached out and took her hand. From behind him, others emerged, older ones, weary ones. No guards. No ceremony. Just people. Elira led them forward, lantern casting long, gentle shadows behind them. The path did not clear at once, but frost melted with every step. In the village square stood a ruined hearth, its stones cracked, its woodpile forgotten. Elira crouched beside it, guided by old memory. With trembling fingers she stacked new kindling. No magic, just hands. The villagers watched silently, uncertain. A spark flickered, then caught. Fire bloomed, not powerful, but real. Smoke curled skyward, and warmth radiated outward. Children crept closer. An elder placed a kettle above the flame. Laughter, timid at first, broke the quiet. Elira sat on the ground beside them, no longer above, no longer apart. She wrapped her shawl tighter and let the fire do what she never had, invite others close. Back within the palace, Elira ascended the council chamber, long abandoned. Dust veiled the old banners. Scrolls remained sealed. She stood at the central dais. Not to rule, to release. She unfurled a parchment once meant for declarations of war and proclamations of power. With ink, not spell, she wrote, "Let all things grow again, without command, without fear." She sealed it not with a crest, but a pressed violet from the chapel floor. Then she rolled up the scroll and placed it into the Book of Queens. Her final decree was not one of control, but permission. The ice did not shatter. It softened. Spring did not burst forth. It arrived shyly. A single bud on a windowsill. A breeze that smelled of earth. A child's song rising between empty halls. Elira wandered the palace gardens, not to fix, not to mourn, but to listen. Birds nested in the archways again. Moss painted cracks in the marble. A fox slept where gods once stood. She reached the old sundial. It ticked. Once, then again. She smiled. Time long frozen moved again, not backward to what was, nor forward in chase. Just forward. She pressed her hand to her chest where the cold once lived. Now, it was only quiet. And the quiet was kind. Elira climbed alone to the highest ridge of the Silver Spines. A place once feared for its howling winds and mirrored cliffs. Pilgrims had long spoken of voices here, not ghosts but truths. She reached the summit at dusk. Below her, the kingdom exhaled, a mosaic of thaw and breath. Above, stars gathered, not as distant fires, but as witnesses. Then came the first echo, not from the mountain, but from within. "You are not broken," it said. She listened. Another followed. "You were never the cold, only the one who wore it." She stood tall. The air did not bite. It blessed. She closed her eyes. And for the first time, her breath joined the wind, not separate, but part of it. Returning from the peak, Elira crossed the glacier mirror, a lake of ice so clear, it reflected the sky with unsettling perfection. Each step she took felt like walking clouds. In the mirror below, she saw not just herself, but every self she had been: queen, mother, child, monster, healer. They walked with her. None spoke. None judged. They simply were. She stopped and whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me behind." The sky shimmered. Then a snowflake landed on the ice and melted. It left no scar, only ripples. And Elira understood. She had always been changing, even when she thought she was frozen. At the ancient amphitheater, villagers gathered, not for decree, but for silence. Elira stood among them, not above them. The people had brought stones, each carved with a memory. They formed a circle. She placed hers last. It bore no image, just a single spiral etched by hand. They sat together, wind in their hair, eyes closed, listening. Not to speeches, to breath, to earth, to one another. One child reached out, not to ask a question, but to place a hand on hers. The spiral stone warmed. The circle pulsed. Elira felt it, not as magic, but presence. Not something summoned, something remembered. That night, in her dreams, Elira stood in the golden meadow of her youth. Her daughter waited, not as ghost nor memory, just presence. They did not speak. They danced, barefoot through tall grass, arms outstretched. Wind played in their hair. The moon watched. When the music faded, the child placed a small object in Elira's hand, a seed. "You don't need to find me," she said. "I'm already here." Elira woke with the seed clutched in her palm. It glowed faintly. The past had not been lost. It had been transformed. At sunrise, Elira returned to the pilgrimage tree. She knelt at its base, holding the glowing seed. Villagers stood at a distance, watching, yet giving space. Without ceremony, she pressed it into the soil. Nothing happened at first. Then a pulse. A shoot broke the ground, green, tender, trembling. Not a miracle. A beginning. Elira stepped back and let it grow, not with her magic, but with light, and time, and care. She turned to the people. "This is not a kingdom," she said. "It is a garden, and it belongs to all of us." The silence that followed was sacred, and in that silence, spring arrived. Beneath a blooming arch of silver blossoms, the villagers gathered without command. No trumpets blared. No banners rose. Yet there was ceremony, gentle, unspoken. Children wove wreaths of wild herbs and sprigs of new growth. One approached Elira with a crown not of jewels, but of green shoots and clover. The child raised it. "May we place this on you?" Elira knelt. The moment the wreath touched her hair, sunlight broke the cloud line. It wasn't a coronation. It was recognition. Not of a ruler. Of a return. She stood not taller, but clearer. Around her, the trees shimmered. The bells in the distant chapel rang softly, not because they were told to, but because the wind knew it was time. The crown was not heavy. It pulsed with life. And Elira smiled, not to lead, but to walk beside. Elira returned to the palace's grand library, once sealed behind arcane doors and guarded by enchanted sentinels. Now those locks lay open, pages rustling with morning wind. Books that once trembled beneath frost opened on their own. Children wandered freely, curious fingers tracing histories once hidden. Elira sat beside the fireplace, rekindled with no command. A small boy crawled into her lap with a book on wildflowers. "Read this one," he said. She did. Her voice, once reserved for orders and oaths, now softened with stories and wonder. She wasn't teaching. She was remembering. And every time she turned a page, something old was released, not erased, but given breath again. In the far corridor of the east wing, a frame hung crooked, its glass once shattered. It had been the painting of Elira and her daughter, cast aside in grief. Now, villagers stood before it, gently brushing away dust. Elira stepped forward, gazing into the faded scene. Her hand reached for the edge, but she didn't fix it. Instead, she added something, a single stroke of color, sunlight yellow, onto the child's crown. Color bled gently into the canvas. The past, it seemed, did not resist. A young artist behind her whispered, "May I finish it?" Elira nodded. "Make it yours." She turned away, leaving the painting behind, not to forget, but to let it grow beyond her. There was one door left. Deep beneath the palace in the Vault of Origins, sealed by her own hand on the day she turned away from life. No guards. No chains. Only the spell of refusal. Now, Elira stood before it, palm open. The lock, long rusted, clicked softly. Inside lay remnants of things never spoken. Her husband's old cloak, a broken rattle, the cradle untouched since the frost. She stepped inside. She didn't weep. She bowed. Then she folded the cloak, tucked the rattle beside it, and placed the cradle under the skylight. The moonlight kissed it gently. She did not leave the door open. She left it unlocked. Some things are not meant to be closed again. Elira stood once more at the hill beyond the village, where once she froze the wind itself. Now the breeze came and went without fear. The fields had turned from white to gold. She stood barefoot in soft grass, eyes closed, face to sky. Behind her the land sang, not in hymns, but in harvest, in harmony, in ordinary joy. She breathed in, then spoke, not to anyone, but to life itself. "I do not fear the thaw." Silence followed, not hollow, but full. A single snowflake drifted from the sky. It landed on her hand and melted into her skin. She smiled. Even now, still beauty in what fades. And the world, finally, moved on, not from her. With her.